Griffin, Georgia, September 13th, 2024. At 11:08 a.m. outside the Spalding County Courthouse, Tom Mallory pulled up beside his ex-wife, Krystal Evans, and shot her dead. How many times does a black woman have to beg for her life before someone believes her? If this makes your heart drop, subscribe now because too many of our sisters' names are only remembered when it's too late. If you won't, tell us why in the comments. She was not just another name on a news ticker. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman who built her own way in the world, brick by brick, deal by deal. Her laugh could fill a room, her faith unshaken, her dreams still in motion. But in the last days of her life, Krystal's world became smaller. The spaces where she felt safe began to disappear. Her closest friends noticed she spoke softer, kept her phone closer, and checked over her shoulder more often. She had done what the law told her to do. She filed the paperwork, she told the truth, she warned everyone who would listen, and still, it was not enough. On that warm Friday morning, the courthouse was busy with routine cases, traffic fines, custody disputes, probation hearings. Krystal walked out of those glass doors carrying more than just her purse. She carried the weight of years of surviving someone who vowed to love her but never let her go. Just a few feet from her car, life and death would collide. But to understand what happened in those final seconds, we have to step back into the life of a woman who refused to stop living and the man who refused to let her live without him. This is not just a story about one woman's tragedy, it's about a pattern, a warning that went unanswered, and a system that once again proved its walls are not high enough to keep danger out. Krystal Evans did everything she could to stay alive, but on September 13th, 2024, as courthouse doors closed behind her, so did every chance she had left. You are watching Black Girl Lost, where we don't just tell true crime stories, we tell her story, the ones the system tried to erase, the ones the headlines never fully explain. Subscribe to bring more attention to stories that matter. Like if you believe black women deserve protection. Comment your thoughts as you watch. Your voice helps bring justice. She was born in Georgia, where summer evenings felt endless, and laughter traveled through open windows like a warm breeze. Her childhood was wrapped in the arms of a close-knit family. The kind where Sunday dinner was not just a meal, but a tradition, where the church pew held the weight of generations before her, and where her faith was not just taught, it was lived. From the time she was a little girl, Krystal had a smile that seemed to catch light. Teachers remembered it, neighbors mentioned it. It was the kind of smile that made strangers feel like old friends, and old friends feel like family. Her world back then was simple, but her dreams were anything but. Krystal's ambition was not something you could miss. She stepped into adulthood with a plan, not a wish. Real estate was more than a career for her. It was her canvas. She could walk into an empty, silent house and already picture the laughter that would fill it, the meals that would be shared in its kitchen, the children who would take their first steps on its floors. She was the one who could take a crumbling property and see not the peeling paint or the uneven floors, but the future. Her goal was clear: build her own agency, one that not only sold homes but built communities. It was work that took time, hustle, and relentless dedication. And she poured herself into all of it without complaint. Still, of all her accomplishments, none matched the title she wore most proudly: mother. Her daughter Precious was her anchor and her compass. Krystal called her my biggest blessing, and she meant it with every breath. From school projects to bedtime prayers, she made sure her little girl grew up knowing she was loved beyond measure. Every success Krystal reached for was not for herself. It was to build a life where Precious could stand on solid ground and dream even bigger than her mother dared. Her friends will tell you she was the glue in every circle she touched, the one who remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, the one who showed up at your door when life got heavy without asking if she should come. She had a sense of humor that could turn a tense moment into one filled with laughter, and a resilience that made people wonder how she stayed so steady even when life tried to shake her. But beneath that strength there was something else, a belief that people could change, that mistakes, no matter how deep, could be forgiven, that sometimes the past deserved another chance. It was a beautiful quality, but it was also the kind of faith in others that one day would cost her everything. And then, There was him, the man she once loved. In those early photos, you see two people leaning into each other like they shared the same heartbeat, smiles so wide they looked untouchable, a woman who believed she had found her partner for life, and a man who, back then, seemed to want the same. But as we'll soon see, pictures have a way of hiding what words never could. So before we step into the part of her story where the light begins to dim, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. What dream of hers broke your heart the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe every Black woman's story deserves to be told before she's gone, hit subscribe right now. If you do not, then go ahead and tell the world why you think her life was not worth it. At first, it was easy to explain away the changes. The man she once loved, the man whose smile matched hers in those early photographs, just seemed stressed, maybe overwhelmed by life's demands. But the warmth in his voice began to fade. The gentle hand on her shoulder became a cold grip on her freedom. The small disagreements that most couples could brush off started to linger like smoke after a fire, staining the air between them. It was not long before the charm she once clung to became a mask he only wore when it served him. And then came the unthinkable, an admission whispered in moments that should have been safe. The man she thought she knew revealed truths about himself that rewrote the foundation of their marriage, leaving her standing on ground that no longer felt solid. But instead of leaving her in peace, his attention sharpened into something darker. He began appearing without warning, at her office, outside her home, in the parking lot of the grocery store. His number lit up her phone at all hours. If she did not answer, the calls multiplied. If she tried to ignore him, his car would creep past her street, slow enough to let her know he was there. Friends started to notice the shadows under her eyes, the way she looked over her shoulder in public. "Krystal, you're not safe," one friend told her, holding her hand across a coffee table. But how do you tell someone who has built a life with a person that the life itself has become a threat? The financial pressure began to mount. Money withheld, bills mysteriously delayed, sudden debts she never agreed to. It was not just her bank account he tried to control. It was her spirit. She would laugh at brunch with her girlfriends, but the moment her phone buzzed, the light in her face dimmed. And then there were the words no one should ever have to hear. Words so sharp they cut through every layer of denial. If I cannot have you, no one will. Even in retelling them now, the echo chills. Those who loved her urged her to document everything, every call, every visit, every threat. And she did. The paper trail led her to a courthouse where she clutched a pen and filled out the forms for a protective order. The pages carried her name, his name, and the weight of her hope for safety. But when the clerk stamped them, there was no applause, no relief, only the sound of her footsteps echoing against the courthouse walls. For the next few seconds, I want you to sit with the image of those papers on a silent black screen. No music, no voices, just the truth in ink. If you have ever ignored a red flag in love, you know how fast things can turn deadly. Subscribe and protect the next sister before it is too late. September 11th, 2024. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, the way all government buildings do, but to Krystal Evans, it felt like fresh air after years of suffocation. She stood there, pen in hand, signing the last page of her divorce papers. The ink bled onto the line as if sealing more than a legal document. It was sealing her hope for a future free from fear. That same day, a judge granted her a permanent protective order. No more phone calls, no more unannounced visits, no more driving past her house like a shadow she could never outrun. At least, that was the promise. The next day, September 12th, she walked into the sheriff's department, the protective order still crisp from the printer, and told them he was following her again. Same car, same streets, same eyes tracking her from a distance. She told them about the endless calls. She told them about the gay videos and the threats he was sending, mocking her, trying to humiliate her, twisting every detail of her personal life into a weapon. But there was no escort provided, no extra patrols, just another note in a file. Later that day, Krystal posted on Facebook. She was transparent about the threats. She called him out, not in a bitter way, but with the kind of weary courage of someone tired of hiding. "I am not afraid of you anymore." She mixed those posts with her usual uplifting words, scriptures, affirmations, little reminders to her friends that life is still worth living. It was as if she believed that if she kept speaking light into the world, the darkness would have no place to land. But in another part of town, Tom Mallory was living a different reality. To the public, he still wore the mask, casual smiles, friendly exchanges, the man people thought they knew. But behind closed doors, something had calcified in him. This was no longer about love or loss, it was about control. He was planning, methodically, patiently, waiting for the moment when he could make his final statement. Imagine this scene in reverse. A freeze frame of Krystal walking to her car after the court hearing, keys in her hand, the wind catching her hair. That's where this road ends. Now, rewind 72 hours. Every interaction, every ignored warning, every missed opportunity to intervene ticks backward like a clock nobody bothered to reset. The question is not if tragedy could have been avoided, it is who had the chance to stop it and didn't. And I have to ask you, what should the sheriff's department have done here? September 13th, 2024. The sun had barely broken through the thin clouds above Georgetown, Texas, when the courthouse steps began to fill with people, lawyers in pressed suits, families clinging to manila folders, deputies walking briskly with radios clipped to their belts. Among them was Krystal Evans. She was moving with a quiet determination, clutching her purse, her papers, her sense of relief. The divorce was final, the protective order permanent. She had walked into that courthouse believing she was closing the last chapter of her pain. Now she stepped into the open air believing she could finally breathe. But just 40 feet away, in a parking space that should have belonged to any stranger, Thomas Mallory was waiting. He had driven there deliberately, his car angled where hers was parked, his eyes locked on the spot she would have to pass. From a distance, there was nothing alarming, just a man sitting in a vehicle. But inside that driver's seat sat days, weeks, and years of calculated control, humiliation, and rage boiling into a single, violent decision. Krystal walked toward her car, unaware that her final moments had already been decided in his mind. She reached for the handle, keys in her hand. And that is when he moved. In one motion, the driver's side door of his car creaked open just enough for him to raise a gun. The crack of the first shot shattered the morning calm. Glass burst into the air, raining down across her as she collapsed against the steering wheel. More shots followed, each one tearing away the future she had been trying so hard to rebuild. Witnesses froze for a split second, then chaos erupted. A woman's scream pierced through the sound of shattering glass. Someone yelled for her to get down, though she was already lying still, blood staining the white blouse she had chosen that morning, perhaps to mark a fresh start. Sirens were called in seconds after the first shot, the voice on the radio tight and urgent. "Victim down, multiple gunshots, request EMS immediately." The deputies were close, but not close enough. As emergency responders fought through traffic toward her, Mallory sped away from the scene. He did not run in panic. He drove with the mechanical calm of someone who had already decided how this story would end. Hours later, cornered by police, he turned the gun on himself. But fate allowed him to survive, breathing in a hospital bed where Krystal could not. And here is the part that should chill every one of us. Krystal Evans did everything the system told her to do. She left. She went to court. She filed for divorce. She got the protective order. And she still died on the pavement, steps away from the very building that was supposed to ensure her safety. If you can hear this and feel nothing, tell us in the comments. But if you believe this fight matters, if you believe women like Krystal deserve more than a paper shield, then subscribe, because staying silent is not an option. The day after Krystal was taken from this world, her daughter Precious stood before reporters, her voice trembling, eyes burning with both grief and fury. "She called them the day before," she said, her words cutting through the quiet like a blade. "They could have saved her.
New tonight at 11, we're hearing from the family of a woman shot and killed outside of the Spalding County Courthouse. And tonight, the daughter of Krystal Evans says her mother did not have to die because she believes law enforcement actually dropped the ball because of a history of domestic violence between her mother and the suspect. 11 Alive, Teresa Bowles, live tonight in the newsroom with what we know tonight. Teresa?
Well, Ron, tonight authorities have identified the suspect as Mr. Tom Mallory. Adding to her pain, Precious Evans tells me Mallory is her biological father.
I mean, I feel like I don't have nobody.
Precious Evans says she lost both of her parents at the same time.
I don't have nobody to lean on.
She says she watched her comforter, her mother, Krystal Evans, go through an ugly divorce with her father for a year.
She was so happy after her divorce. She felt free. You know, we were even talking about doing a party.
However, throughout that year, she also says she witnessed disturbing behavior. Krystal posts a cry for help on Facebook last year saying, "Please know if something happens to me, Tom Mallory did it."
Even after the divorce, this man literally texted her, "Not happening."
Precious says her mother was at the Spalding County Courthouse for a hearing connected to their separation Friday afternoon.
The judge did issue a warrant. Instead of the judge taking him in right then and there, the judge said that he could turn himself in Monday night.
In a lengthy Facebook post, Sheriff Daryl Dix says Krystal walked out of the courthouse to her car where Mallory met her, shooting her multiple times from the window. Mallory did not stop for police and eventually shot himself. He's alive, but Evans is not, which Precious believes could have been prevented.
My mom literally called the sheriff department the day before because he was stalking her, and they did nothing. Had they had someone walked out with her, her friend asked, she would still be here.
Dix denies this. He says surveillance video shows Krystal never asked for an escort. His office also confirms there have been several domestic violence calls to the Mallory household. Dix says sometimes the violence was mutual and there were no witnesses to identify the aggressor. Dix says, quote, "Do improvements need to be made to the law? Yes, they do. Maybe it wasn't a deputy or my agency that failed. Maybe it was the law itself. And since she can't get her mom back, Precious will honor her life by fighting for justice with no sympathy for her father."
Not once did you offer your condolences, sympathy, or anything for my mom. That post was to clean his face, to clear his name.
Precious says she's going back to the courthouse to rally for justice Wednesday and plans to hold a vigil for her mother on Thursday.
Yeah, such a heartbreaking story there, Teresa. Thank you.
That night, the courthouse steps where Krystal had taken her final walk became a sea of flickering light. Hundreds gathered for a candlelight vigil, holding signs high above their heads that read, "Justice for Krystal." Tears streamed down faces illuminated by candle flames, mothers clutching daughters a little tighter, husbands and wives holding hands just a little longer. The air was thick with questions no one seemed ready to answer, the kind that hang over a community long after the news cameras leave. For so many, her story was just another passing tragedy. But for her family, for her friends, for every Black woman who has ever been told to trust the system, her name would not fade. On her desk, in the corner of her home, her favorite pen and a leather-bound notebook still sat exactly where she'd left them. Pages half filled with ideas for her next real estate project, notes about new listings, dreams for a life she would never get to live out. They hadn't been touched since the morning she walked out the door for the last time. And as you hear this, ask yourself, if Krystal's story does not stir something deep inside you, if it does not push you to demand more from the very systems meant to protect us, then say it plainly in the comments. For the rest of us, the ones who believe her life was worth more than a passing headline, subscribe. Because stories like hers must be told and must never be forgotten. What change do you want to see after hearing Krystal's story? In America, Black women are 3 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner than white women, and yet their cases rarely make it beyond a brief segment in the local news. The numbers are not just statistics. They are warnings, written in names and faces that deserve to be remembered. In the past year alone, countless Black women have been murdered in the very places they should have been safest. In their own homes, in their cars, even outside courthouses where they went seeking protection. You will see their faces now, one after another, names you may have never heard, lives you may have never known. But each one of them mattered. Each one had people who loved them. Each one trusted that someone, somewhere, would listen when they cried for help. And still, here we are. As their images flicker across the screen, there is a truth we can no longer ignore. When Black women scream, the world too often turns down the volume. The headlines shrink, the coverage fades, and the stories disappear into silence. But this time, that silence ends here. You cannot watch Krystal's story and pretend you did not see. You cannot hear her daughter's pain and act as if it is someone else's fight. And if you have stayed with us through every detail of her life, her struggle, and her death, yet still do not subscribe, you are turning down the volume too. You are choosing the same silence that allowed her cries to be ignored. Do not be part of that silence. This is the moment to make sure her name and the names of so many others are never pushed aside again. Because the truth is, the world will keep turning whether we speak up or not. But if we do not speak up, nothing changes and more women will die. Her face comes back into focus one last time. Not in fear, not in tragedy, but in that warm, unguarded smile that made people feel welcome before they even knew her name. Around it, the glow of candles flickers, flowers laid with trembling hands by those who loved her most. On the screen, the words appear softly, in memory of Krystal Shanae Evans, 1980 to 2024. And for a moment, the room feels heavier, as if the weight of every name, every face, every story we have heard tonight presses down on us. Her life was more than the way it ended. She was a mother, a friend, a woman whose laughter lit up quiet rooms. But her death reminds us that the systems meant to protect so often fail, especially for women who look like her. And when those systems fail, silence is the most dangerous weapon left. Say her name. Share her story. Do not let it fade into another unsolved, unspoken wound in our community. Because if we keep quiet, it is not just the system that failed, it is us. Remember her own words, typed in the quiet before she was taken. If something happens to me, please know who did it. This was not just a plea, it was a prophecy. And now the responsibility is ours to carry. As the screen fades to black, the message is clear, stark, and unshakable. Subscribe, speak, protect. This is not the end of her story. It is the beginning of what we choose to do next.